April is not just the beginning of spring. It is the most important 30 days in your entire gardening year, and most people spend it standing in a garden center aisle, overwhelmed, picking whatever looks prettiest in the 4-inch pot, without any idea that the decision they make in April is what determines whether their garden looks spectacular in July, still beautiful in September, and genuinely interesting even in December. Here is what the gardeners with the yards everyone slows down to look at understand that most people do not. They are not planting for right now. They are planting for the whole year. They are thinking in seasons, not weekends. And they are doing it with fast-growing perennials planted in April, because April is the biological window that changes everything. When soil temperatures sit between 50 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit, perennial root systems establish at their fastest and deepest rate. Roots planted in April have 8 to 10 full weeks to anchor themselves before summer heat arrives. Those same plants put in the ground in June are spending their energy coping with heat and drought while simultaneously trying to establish. The April plants are already settled, already spreading, already preparing to bloom. That head start compounds season after season. The garden you build in April this year is the garden that rewards you for the next decade. What I am going to walk you through today is every fast-growing perennial worth planting this month, explained clearly and completely, so you know not just what to plant but exactly what each one does, when it performs, and why your yard looks dramatically different because of it. Let us get into the first one. April gardening decisions are different from any other month because you are not just choosing color for this weekend. You are choosing the structure and the character of your outdoor space for the next 10 years. Every perennial on this list was selected because it establishes fast, grows fast, and delivers across multiple seasons year after year. This is how you build a garden that earns its keep. Creeping phlox opens the season with something nothing else in the perennial world quite matches. While most of your garden is still waking up, while the soil is still cold and most plants are barely showing green, creeping phlox is already producing the most vivid display of color you will see all spring. Electric pink, deep magenta, pure white, soft lavender, cascading down slopes and over walls in what looks like a living waterfall of bloom. Phlox subulata is hardy in USDA zones 3 through 9, and it earns its spot on this list because of how aggressively and how quickly it establishes from an April planting. Planted now, in cool, moist soil, the trailing stems root themselves wherever they contact the ground. By midsummer of the first year, a single small plant has already pushed outward noticeably. By the second spring, you have a sweep of color that looks like it has been there for years. The foliage stays evergreen through winter, giving you ground-level structure and color in every month of the year. Full sun to light shade, well-draining soil, and one care task annually. After it finishes blooming, shear it back lightly. That one cut keeps it dense, prevents the center from going woody, and drives stronger spread the following season. Problem slopes, erosion areas, bare patches along walkways. Creeping phlox solves all of them while making your yard look extraordinary in the process. Salvia nemorosa, perennial salvia, is the plant that makes gardeners feel like they finally understand what perennial gardening is supposed to feel like. You plant it in April. By late May, it is producing those deep violet-purple upright flower spikes, a color so saturated and jewel-toned that it almost does not look real in afternoon sunlight. You cut it back hard after that first flush. Within 3 weeks, fresh growth pushes up from the base. A full second bloom follows in midsummer. Cut it back again and many plants send up a third flush in early fall. 3 complete bloom cycles from a single plant in a single season, coming back every year to do it again. Hardy in zones 4 through 8. Full sun, well-draining soil, genuinely drought-tolerant once that April planting has settled its roots through the cool weeks of spring. The pH range of 5.5 to 7.0 covers the natural conditions of most American gardens without amendment. Deer avoid it because of the aromatic foliage, making it especially valuable where deer pressure is constant. Pollinators love it, bees and butterflies working those spikes continuously from when they open. The compact mounding habit makes it perfect for the front or middle of any border. If you plant nothing else from this list, perennial salvia makes the strongest case for what April perennials can do for a garden. Catmint, Walker's Low specifically, and this plant has a quiet reputation among experienced gardeners that it absolutely deserves. Nepeta X Fasani, Walker's Low produces lavender blue flowers over silvery gray aromatic foliage from late spring through midsummer, mounding to about 2 feet and cascading naturally over pathway edges and border fronts without any training or intervention from you. It blooms for weeks, then you cut it back by half. Within 3 weeks it rebounds with a second flush that is often denser and more vigorous than the first. 2 full bloom seasons in 1 year. Hardy in zones 4 through 8. Drought tolerant once established. Deer avoided completely. The aromatic foliage naturally deters most biting insects from the surrounding area. Bees are drawn to it in numbers that will genuinely stop you mid-task the first time you see a catmint in full bloom, with serious pollinator activity working it. This is also one of the fastest establishing perennials you can plant in April, because it puts root energy first, building below ground before pushing significant growth above. By midsummer of the first year, it looks like it has been in your border for 3 seasons. That is the April planting advantage working exactly as it is supposed to. Catmint in zones 4 and 5 benefits from a light layer of mulch over the crown through the first winter after planting. After that first season, the root system is established deeply enough to handle whatever the winter brings without any protection. Black-eyed Susan, specifically Rudbeckia fulgida goldsturm, is the perennial that fills the most strategically important gap in a year-round garden. Most fast-growing spring perennials peak in May and June, and then hand the baton to midsummer performers. Black-eyed Susan catches that baton in July and carries it all the way through October. 4 full months of golden yellow petals around rich chocolate brown centers that photograph beautifully and hold their color even in intense afternoon sun that bleaches lesser plants. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. Poor soil, clay soil, sandy soil, compacted soil. It handles all of it without complaint once established. And established from an April planting with cool weather root development time, it hits its first full bloom season with significantly more vigor than a later planting of the same plant. University horticultural research confirms the goldsturm cultivar blooms longer and more prolifically than the standard species across multiple American growing zones. It spreads 2 ways simultaneously. The root mass expands outward each year, producing more flowering stems, and seed heads drop seeds that germinate into new plants the following spring, quietly filling surrounding areas without any help from you. Leave those seed heads standing through winter. Goldfinches and sparrows feed on them consistently from October through February. You are running a free, self-sustaining wildlife feeding station from one April planting decision. Coneflower, Echinacea, is the perennial that earns its place in a year-round garden not once but 3 times over. First in summer, when those distinctive daisy-form flowers in purple, orange, red, pink, white, and yellow bloom from July through September and attract monarch butterflies, swallowtail butterflies, and bees in numbers that make the whole garden feel alive with movement. Second in fall, when the raised seed cone centers, now dried and darkening, become architectural elements in the garden as surrounding plants go dormant. And third in winter, when those same seed heads feed goldfinches, chickadees, and housefinches through the hardest months of the year. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. Echinacea planted in April establishes the deep tap root system that makes it genuinely drought-tolerant by its second summer, and noticeably more so with each passing year. Magnus purple is the classic, with larger flower heads than the wild species. White swan for pure white with warm orange centers. Hot papaya for double orange-red blooms that represent the most modern and dramatic take on coneflower available. Do not cut these down in fall cleanup. Leave every stem and seed head standing through winter. The structure they provide is genuinely beautiful when frost coats them on a cold December morning. Goldfinches and chickadees feed directly from those seed cones through the coldest months, and the free reseeding while the plant stands means more plants and more bloom next season at 0 additional cost. Daylily. The case for planting daylilies in April rather than later is built on one simple truth. The root system of a daylily planted in cool April soil has 2 full months to establish before it needs to support the energy demands of summer bloom. That establishment period produces a plant in its first summer that blooms as strongly as a 2-year-old planting would from a later start. Hemerocallis is hardy in zones 3 through 9, covers every color except true blue, and blooms in waves from early summer through mid-fall when you plant a mix of early, mid-season, and late varieties together. Each individual flower lasts exactly 1 day, which is where the name comes from. But each stem carries multiple buds that open sequentially, and an established clump produces so many stems simultaneously that the display runs continuously for weeks. The dense grass-like foliage suppresses weeds so completely that many highway departments use daylilies on roadsides, specifically to eliminate herbicide treatments. One critical note: daylilies are acutely toxic to cats. Every part of the plant, including the pollen. If cats spend time in your garden, skip this one entirely or fence it off. For everyone else, a single clump planted this April produces enough divisions within 4 to 5 years to fill 10 times the space at zero additional cost. That is the mathematics of perennial gardening that annual gardeners never experience. Russian sage is the perennial that experienced gardeners rely on most heavily for the second half of the gardening year. Perovskia atriplicifolia produces airy, luminous blue-purple flowers on silver-white aromatic stems from July through October. 4 straight months of bloom at the exact time when many other perennials are winding down, and the garden most needs something to carry it forward. Hardy in zones 4 through 9. Deer avoid it completely. Pest pressure is essentially zero, and the silver architectural stem structure that remains after blooming ends provides genuine visual interest through winter when everything else has gone quiet. Here is the detail that transforms Russian sage performance and that most gardening content misses entirely. This plant genuinely thrives in poor soil, not average soil. Poor, lean, dry, unamended soil. Plant it in your richest, most heavily composted garden bed and it produces lush, floppy growth that falls open and looks disappointing. Plant it in your worst, most neglected, driest spot and it stands tall, blooms for 4 months, and looks spectacular. Match the plant to the conditions it evolved for. That is not a compromise, that is the correct technique. 1 task per year. Cut back to 6 inches in late February. Everything else it handles on its own. In Zone 4 specifically, moving the container or positioning the plant against a protected south-facing wall before hard freeze gives it extra insurance through the coldest weeks. In Zones 8 and 9, it may behave as semi-evergreen through mild winters, keeping its silver stem structure and providing genuine year-round interest without any additional effort on your part. Goldenrod, Solidago, rugosa, fireworks. Before anything else, one fact that changes how most American gardeners see this plant. Goldenrod has been blamed for fall allergies for generations. That blame is scientifically wrong. Goldenrod produces heavy, sticky pollen carried exclusively by insects. It cannot become airborne. It cannot enter your sinuses. Ragweed, which blooms at the same time and looks nothing like goldenrod, produces the lightweight airborne pollen that actually causes fall allergies. Goldenrod simply stood nearby and took the blame for decades. Plant it and watch what happens in September and October, when most of your garden has slowed down significantly. Flower stems arch outward and downward in long, graceful sprays, covered in tiny golden yellow blooms radiating in every direction, like fireworks frozen in the moment of explosion. That is where the variety name comes from, and it is not an exaggeration. Hardy in zones 4 through 9. It supports over 100 species of native bees, butterflies, and beneficial insects, making it one of the highest ecological value plants you can add to an American home garden. The September and October bloom window fills the exact gap when most other perennials have already slowed down, and the garden most needs something to carry it forward with energy and color. Divide every 3 years in early spring to keep it performing at its peak and to generate free plants that fill more of your garden at no cost. Bee balm, Monarda didyma, is the plant that makes hummingbirds come to your yard. Not occasionally, not if you are lucky. Reliably, repeatedly, all season long, because those spiky tubular blooms in blazing red, deep pink, and rich purple are biologically engineered for hummingbird feeding. The beak fits perfectly inside. Plant bee balm this April, and by midsummer, you will have hummingbirds hovering within feet of wherever you sit outside. There is no feeder that creates that experience as consistently and as naturally as this plant does from its own flowers. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. It spreads through underground rhizomes, filling a designated space steadily each season. In a larger naturalistic area, give it room. In a formal border, divide every 2 to 3 years to keep it contained and productive. Full sun to partial shade with consistent moisture. Choose mildew-resistant modern cultivars to avoid the one issue older varieties are susceptible to. Jacob Klein for deep red, raspberry wine for rich pink. Both perform beautifully and both will have hummingbirds at them by July if you plant this April. New England aster finishes the list because it finishes the garden year. Symphyiotrichum novae Angliae is hardy in zones 3 through 8, and it blooms in September and October when almost everything else has wound down. Produced in colors so saturated and vivid, they look almost unreal against the amber and gold of the surrounding autumn landscape. Deep violet, purple, rich lavender, bright pink, pure white, all with golden yellow centers that glow in the low autumn light. This plant does not look washed out in fall the way so many things do. It deepens. It intensifies. It performs at the end of the year with the same energy that summer plants perform at their peak. Asters are also among the very last reliable nectar sources available to monarch butterflies before they complete their full migration journey to Mexico. Research from Monarch Watch documents New England aster as a critical late-season fueling station on the eastern and central monarch flyways. In late May, pinch every stem back by half. In late June, pinch back by half again. 2 pinches, 2 minutes of work, and the plant produces a compact, self-supporting mound with dramatically more branching and dramatically more flowers than it would have without those cuts. Skip the pinching, and you get a plant that flops and produces a fraction of its potential. Do it and you get a fall display that stops everyone who walks past your yard in October. Beyond their ecological importance to monarch migration, asters are also among the most deer-resistant fall-blooming perennials available to American gardeners. The slightly bitter foliage discourages deer browsing, which makes them especially valuable for fall garden performance in regions where deer pressure tends to increase in autumn, as other food sources become scarcer. Yarrow closes this list not as an afterthought but as the answer to a question most gardeners ask every year. What do I put in that terrible spot where nothing grows? The dry, rocky, sun-baked area where the soil is thin and the conditions are brutal. Achillea millefolium is hardy in zones 3 through 9 and it does not just tolerate those conditions, it prefers them. Rich, heavily amended soil makes yarrow floppy and weak. Poor, dry, rocky soil makes it bloom harder, stand taller, and spread more aggressively than you expect. Flat-topped flower clusters in yellow, white, pink, coral, and deep red. Paprika and strawberry seduction are 2 standout cultivars with warm tones that look extraordinary against yarrow's feathery, silvery green foliage. Blooming from late spring all the way through late summer. 6 months of color from a plant that releases natural allelopathic compounds into the surrounding soil that suppress weed seed germination. Its flowers attract parasitic wasps, lacewings, and hoverflies that prey on aphids, whiteflies, and soft-bodied pests across your entire garden while yarrow blooms. You are not just filling a difficult spot, you are improving the ecological function of the whole garden around it. Plant yarrow in April in your worst soil, and watch it become one of the most productive and rewarding spots in your yard. Now, all of these plants share one thing in common beyond being fast-growing and perennial. They are all dramatically better for an April planting than for any other time. The cool soil builds the root foundation that everything above ground depends on. The 8 to 10 weeks of establishment before summer heat arrives is the difference between a plant that copes with its first summer and a plant that thrives through it. And there is a compounding effect that happens year after year with perennials that does not exist with annuals. Every spring, these plants come back slightly larger than the year before. They spread slightly further. They bloom slightly more prolifically. The garden you build this April becomes a genuinely different, genuinely better, genuinely more beautiful place every single year, without you starting over, without you replanting, without you spending that money again at the register every spring. These are not just plants. They are long-term investments in the outdoor space you live in, and the time to make them is right now, while the soil is cool and the window is open. Tell me in the comments below which of these perennials you are planting this April, and what USDA zone or state you are gardening in. I genuinely want to know where this community is growing and what is going in the ground this month. Give this a thumbs up if it helped you today and subscribe for practical perennial gardening content every week. April is open right now. Go use it. The gardeners whose yards stop people in their tracks are not working harder than you. They made smarter decisions in April. They planted things that came back. They let biology do the heavy lifting. And they are spending their summers sitting outside enjoying it, rather than fighting it.